the weight of whispers. Eleanor Harper wiped the sweat from her brow, her hands calloused from years of tending her modest homestead on the outskirts of Silver Creek. The sun had barely climbed above the horizon, casting golden streaks across the fields, yet the weight of the day already pressed on her shoulders. At 50, Ellie had grown accustomed to the solitude that came with running her farm alone, but solitude was different from loneliness. She had friends, of course. Maggie Lawson, her steadfast confidant, who visited weekly, but the townspeople's whispers cut deeper than any plow could dig into the earth. From a distance, Ellie could hear the faint hum of gossip drifting from the town square. Settlers she had known for decades pointed fingers, shaking their heads as though her single status at 50 were some moral failing. Still alone, Ellie Harper? A woman sneered. Does she even want anyone? A man laughed, nudging his companion. Maybe she's just too proud to admit she needs someone. The words were cruel, but Ellie had long since learned to meet them with calm eyes and a measured smile. Pride, after all, was a survival skill as vital as any she applied to her farm. Maggie, ever empathetic, would later scold her for bearing such judgment silently. Yet Ellie could not help but feel the pang of isolation. She had loved once, long ago, only to have the man leave without a word, leaving her heart more cautious than broken. Over the years, she had built walls around herself, walls of practicality, of dignity, of quiet endurance. But sometimes, as the wind rustled through the wheat and the sun dipped low, she allowed herself a private thought. Perhaps she deserved more than solitude. This morning, like many others, she moved from task to task with graceful efficiency, milking the cows, tending to the garden, repairing a broken fence post. Her life was a rhythm of work and care, punctuated by moments of small joy. She paused to watch a calf stumble clumsily toward its mother, a gentle smile breaking across her face. Compassion was a constant companion, more loyal than any human she had encountered in recent years. It was during one such quiet moment that Ellie first noticed him. Gideon Blackwell, the wealthy rancher who owned most of the land surrounding Silver Creek. He had been passing through, his sleek horse trotting across the dusty road, when he stopped and observed her from the edge of the field. His eyes, sharp yet contemplative, lingered not on her age or status, but on the deliberate care with which she worked. There was curiosity there, a faint recognition of something rare, someone who had endured life's harshness with grace rather than bitterness. Ellie, for her part, sensed the scrutiny and straightened her posture, wary of the judgment she expected from outsiders. Gideon dismounted slowly, offering a polite nod. "You have a way with this land," he remarked, his voice steady, not condescending. "It's uncommon to see such dedication." She inclined her head, wary yet intrigued. "Thank you," she replied. "It's not much, but it's honest work." A brief silence stretched between them, punctuated only by the soft lowing of the cows. The settlers' voices in the distance faded, irrelevant in this small, suspended moment. For the first time in years, Ellie felt a flicker of something unfamiliar. Not desire, exactly, but recognition. Someone had noticed the life she had built, and in that recognition lay a spark of validation she hadn't realized she craved. But the spark was fragile, for Gideon's presence carried its own complications. He was married, though the rumors of a cold, distant wife had long circulated, and while his eyes held kindness, they also suggested hidden burdens. Ellie felt a twinge of caution. Her heart, long shielded against disappointment, whispered for restraint even as her mind acknowledged the rare warmth of connection. The day wore on, each task completing with practiced hands and quiet satisfaction. Yet in the back of her mind lingered Gideon's attentive gaze, a question unspoken. Could someone notice her for who she truly was, beyond the whispers and ridicule? She returned to the farmhouse as the sun began its descent, weary but strangely light, carrying with her the silent promise of possibility. As she lit the hearth and listened to the wind through the cracks in the wooden walls, Ellie allowed herself one thought, tender and cautious. Perhaps life still held surprises, even at 50. The world outside would continue its judgment, its gossip, its ridicule, but somewhere a seed of change had taken root. And with it, the story of Eleanor Harper, once overlooked, was only just beginning. The quiet spark. The morning mist clung to the edges of Silver Creek as Eleanor Harper stepped out of her farmhouse, boots sinking slightly into the damp soil. The air smelled of wet earth and freshly turned hay, a scent she had come to associate with both labor and solace. She moved with her usual rhythm, checking the garden, coaxing the plants along with gentle hands, and listening to the soft chorus of birds welcoming the day. Despite her careful routines, a small restlessness lingered, a subtle echo of yesterday's encounter. Gideon Blackwell had returned, this time for business dealings with neighboring ranchers. Ellie noticed him before he saw her, standing by the corral, inspecting his horse. He looked no different than any other man of his stature, tall, broad-shouldered, commanding respect without effort. But there was an air of quiet attention about him, a watchfulness that set him apart. For a moment, their eyes met, a brief acknowledgement that carried more weight than 100 casual greetings. "Morning, Ms. Harper," he called, his tone courteous, even gentle. "The frost hasn't harmed the garden." Ellie wiped her hands on her apron, a faint blush warming her cheeks. "Not yet. These old roots are hardier than they look," she replied, her voice steady. There was something deliberate in the way she spoke, careful not to reveal too much, yet not hiding the faint spark of curiosity his presence always stirred. As she moved closer to check the greenhouse, Gideon followed, keeping a respectful distance but engaging in light conversation. He spoke of the market, the upcoming fair, and even the condition of the roads, all mundane topics, yet his attention felt intentional. Ellie noted the subtle way he listened, not merely hearing her words, but absorbing them, as if the life she lived held a gravity often overlooked by others. Maggie's warning echoed her mind. "Be careful, Ellie. Not every kind gaze is safe." But today, under the pale sun and silver mist, the caution seemed easier to set aside. There was no rush, no external pressure, just a quiet companionship that came from two people recognizing the same loneliness in each other. As the morning progressed, a task arose that required both their efforts. A fallen fence post had blocked the path to the creek, and Gideon stepped forward without hesitation. Together, they lifted the heavy timber, aligning it with practiced precision. Their hands brushed more than once, sending sparks of awareness that neither fully acknowledged aloud. For Ellie, each touch was a reminder of vitality, of connection. For Gideon, it was a revelation. In Ellie's competence and care, he saw a soul untouched by pretense, unlike the polished civility of his own household. They paused briefly, hands resting on the post, breathing in tandem as if the silence between them was a conversation of its own. "You make hard work seem almost easy," Gideon said softly, a rare vulnerability threading through his usual composed tone. Ellie allowed herself a small smile. "It's just what needs to be done," she replied, but her eyes betrayed the impact of his words. Recognition, real, human acknowledgement, was a rarity in her life, and Gideon offered it freely, without judgment or expectation. Yet, beneath the calm of the day, tension lingered. The settlers' whispers had not vanished. Even from a distance, Ellie could hear fragments of gossip, sharp and judgmental. "Seen her with that Blackwell man again. She's always hanging around him," someone muttered. Each word was a reminder of the scrutiny that shadowed her every choice. By mid-morning, their collaborative labor had transformed the creek path from obstruction to order, but the emotional landscape was far more complex. Gideon lingered longer than necessity required, offering small gestures of help, carrying buckets of water, adjusting the makeshift fence, sharing quiet laughter. Ellie found herself absorbing these moments, treasuring the subtle intimacy of shared work, the unspoken understanding that grew with every glance and gesture. Eventually, Gideon turned toward his horse, signaling departure, yet he paused once more. "Thank you, Ellie," he said, his voice low, sincere, "for everything. It It means more than you might realize. Ellie's heart fluttered at the quiet weight of his words. You're welcome, Gideon, she murmured, unsure whether she spoke for politeness or for the acknowledgement she secretly craved. As he rode away, the mist began to lift, revealing the familiar contours of her land. Yet something had shifted. The day's labor, the shared smiles, the fleeting touch of hands, all had sown a seed of possibility. She returned to the farmhouse with a sense of cautious anticipation, aware of both the spark ignited and the complexities it entailed. By evening, as she tended the hearth, the thought of Gideon lingered in her mind like a persistent echo. The moral boundaries were unspoken but present. He was a married man, bound by vows that complicated any emotional closeness. And yet, she could not deny the rare resonance of connection, the promise of being seen for who she truly was. As the candlelight flickered across the walls, Ellie allowed herself a private, tentative hope. Perhaps life, even at 50, could offer unexpected companionship. The ember of curiosity glowed within her, fragile but unmistakable, hinting that the quiet spark between them might grow into something undeniable. Shadows between hearts. The dusk settled over Silver Creek with a soft, almost deceptive calm, painting the sky in shades of amber and violet. Eleanor Harper stood at the edge of her porch, hands resting on the railing, listening to the gentle rustle of the wind through the wheat. Today had been ordinary in appearance, yet beneath the routine lingered a tension she could neither ignore nor fully understand. Gideon Blackwell had returned briefly in the afternoon, ostensibly to check on the fence repairs, yet their interaction carried a weight that neither had addressed. Ellie's heart still fluttered at the memory of his gaze, the subtle way his presence seemed to linger longer than propriety allowed. She chastised herself for feeling such warmth toward a married man. Yet the truth could not be denied. There was an undeniable connection, one that transcended casual acquaintance. She had spent years building walls of reason and practicality, but Gideon's attention had begun to chip away at them, revealing the tender longing she had carefully hidden even from herself. Inside the farmhouse, the kettle hummed, but Ellie paid little attention to its whistle. Maggie's voice echoed in her memory, cautioning against entanglement with a man already bound to another. He may admire you, Maggie had warned, but admiration does not erase commitment. Be mindful, Ellie. You deserve respect and honesty, not secrecy. She had nodded at the time, a polite agreement masking the truth. Her heart yearned for more than platitudes and warnings. Later, Gideon returned under the guise of checking on his property lines near Ellie's farm. The settlers, ever watchful, whispered from afar, their voices carrying the faint sting of judgment. Always near her, one muttered, like moths to a flame. Ellie ignored them, focusing instead on the quiet conversation that unfolded between them. They worked side by side, carrying supplies and adjusting fence posts, the mundane labor becoming a conduit for subtle intimacy. Their hands brushed more than once, deliberate yet unavoidable. A shared glance lingered, heavy with unspoken meaning. Gideon spoke of frustrations at home, his tone low, tinged with vulnerability he rarely displayed publicly. It's difficult, he admitted, when the world expects appearances rather than connection. Sometimes it feels as if no one truly sees you. Ellie listened, the weight of his confession striking a chord deep within her. Understand that feeling, she said softly. It's lonely when people value what you are on the surface rather than who you are inside. Her words, simple and honest, drew a quiet acknowledgement from him, a nod, a slight smile that held more than casual courtesy. The afternoon sun dipped lower, casting elongated shadows across the farm. The settlers' whispers grew louder in the distance, an omnipresent reminder of societal judgment. Yet within the confines of their shared labor, Ellie and Gideon found a rare sanctuary, a space where recognition and understanding could flourish, even if only temporarily. As the final fence post was secured, Gideon paused, leaning against the wooden beam. Ellie, I value these moments more than I can express, he murmured. There was a hesitation in his voice, a tremor that revealed his inner conflict. He was a man torn between duty and desire, bound by vows yet drawn inexorably toward her warmth and honesty. Ellie felt the pull herself, a magnetic awareness she had long denied. I feel it too, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The admission, though quiet, resonated between them like a chord struck in perfect harmony. They stood there, the world around them fading into a blur of wheat and wind, the weight of what was unspoken more pressing than any words could convey. Night fell, and the stars emerged, pinpricks of silver in a velvet sky. Gideon finally mounted his horse, pausing to glance back at her with a mixture of longing and regret. "Until tomorrow, Ellie," he said, his voice low, intimate, carrying the unspoken tension between them. Alone on her porch, Ellie contemplated the complexity of her emotions. The spark between them was undeniable, but it existed in the shadows of morality and expectation. To act on it would be to risk everything: the respect she had earned, the integrity she valued, and the fragile balance of her own heart. Yet to ignore it entirely felt equally impossible. The wind whispered through the wheat, carrying both the scent of earth and the unspoken promise of what might come. Ellie's thoughts were a mixture of hope and caution, the duality of desire and reason coexisting uneasily within her. She knew the days ahead would test both courage and restraint, forcing her to confront feelings she had long kept buried beneath layers of independence and duty. As she extinguished the lantern in her kitchen and settled by the window, Ellie allowed herself a single, fragile acknowledgement. The connection with Gideon Blackwell was no fleeting curiosity. It was a spark, tender and dangerous, one that could illuminate the deepest corners of her heart, or consume it entirely. And in that uncertainty lay the story yet to unfold. Choices and new beginnings. The morning sun rose slowly over Silver Creek, casting a warm glow across Eleanor Harper's farm. The air carried the crisp scent of dew and tilled soil, a reminder that life continued regardless of heartache or desire. Ellie moved through her chores with quiet determination, though her mind lingered on the events of the past days, the shared glances, the unspoken confessions, and the tension that had grown between her and Gideon Blackwell. Gideon approached her land once more, but this time there was a difference in his stride. The weariness that had shadowed his gaze in earlier visits was softened by purpose, and the careful restraint he had maintained now seemed replaced by resolve. "Ellie," he began, his voice steady yet gentle, "I need to be honest, not just with you, but with myself." Ellie paused, her hands resting on the railing of the porch. She had sensed this moment coming, the culmination of the fragile tension that had built between them. Her heart thudded with anticipation, mingled with caution. "Go on," she said softly, willing herself to remain composed. Gideon took a breath, a hint of vulnerability flickering across his features. "Clara and we've grown distant. The years of expectation and appearances have created a chasm between us. I cannot continue pretending, not when there's something real, something I cannot ignore, here with you." Ellie felt a complex mix of relief and apprehension. The knowledge that he acknowledged the emptiness in his marriage validated the emotions they had shared, yet it also highlighted the moral weight of what lay ahead. She thought of Maggie's warnings, the settler's whispers, and the years of careful self-preservation. "Gideon, she began, her voice faltering, "I've never sought to come between anyone, but I cannot deny what I feel either." They stood in the golden morning light, the world around them quiet, save for the distant lowing of the cows and the gentle rustle of the wind. The choice before them was no longer hypothetical: to pursue honesty and connection, even if it meant upheaval, or to retreat into the safety of restraint. Clara Blackwell entered the scene later that day, arriving at the ranch under the guise of a routine check. Her demeanor was poised, yet her eyes revealed the subtle sting of recognition. She had sensed the shift, the emotional allegiance her husband now sought elsewhere. Unlike the vindictive caricature Ellie had feared, Clara confronted the reality with quiet dignity, choosing not to lash out but to step back. Her withdrawal created a space for Gideon and Ellie to navigate the aftermath without overt conflict, and her measured response allowed both parties to act with integrity rather than secrecy. In the ensuing days, Gideon and Ellie found ways to solidify their connection openly. They collaborated on the farm, tending crops, mending fences, and sharing meals under the shade of the old oak. Every interaction carried the weight of mutual respect, tempered by a profound understanding that the past mistakes of others need not dictate the future of their hearts. The settlers, ever watchful, gradually noticed the change. Whispers of ridicule softened into murmurs of curiosity, and then, unexpectedly, into respect. "She's always been remarkable," someone remarked, observing Ellie and Gideon walking side by side. Now it's clear he sees it too. The town, once a source of judgment, became a backdrop to the quiet redemption and validation that Ellie had long sought. By evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in a cascade of colors, Ellie stood with Gideon on the hill overlooking the fields. Their hands brushed naturally, then intertwined, the gesture neither forced nor hesitant. "We've both taken risks," Ellie said softly, "but it feels right." Gideon nodded, his gaze steady and full of warmth. "Yes, honest and right, and no longer in shadows." Together, they turned toward the farmhouse, ready to face each day with the certainty that comes from integrity and love. The past, the whispers, the judgment, the moral dilemmas remained a part of their story, but it no longer defined it. What mattered now was the recognition of each other's soul, the shared labor and laughter, and the quiet knowledge that love, even when complicated, could flourish when nurtured with honesty. As night fell over Silver Creek, Ellie lit the hearth, casting a gentle glow across the room. Gideon leaned close, a silent affirmation of connection, and in that moment, the weight of solitude and ridicule melted away. The farm, the town, and their intertwined lives became a testament to resilience, courage, and the possibility of love found, even at 50, when hearts are willing to see and be seen. The story of Eleanor Harper and Gideon Blackwell was no longer one of whispers and judgment, but of recognition, hope, and soulful companionship. And in that recognition, both discovered the rare and enduring truth that it is never too late for love, and that the courage to follow one's heart can illuminate even the most shadowed paths.